Elaine, I have dragged you into yet another conversation here on SOMM TV. And this one has a little bit more poignancy than our normal what are the best sellers or and sellers by C, not S word in wine. And it's Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's something that I think I would like to understand more. And I would like you to tell us what that means and what it means in all aspects. But you as a wine writer, and I think one of the more outward facing wine writers, let alone someone who happens to be Indigenous, has probably a lot of thoughts on some of the things I just said. Um, do we need to get beers before this, or are we okay to just
I
jump
think
right
we're
in?
okay to jump in. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But first of all, I appreciate your willingness to bring this conversation to more people because understanding what does this mean? It's not just a holiday and day off from work. It's important that we have these conversations. So thank you.
Oh my God. I'm truly honored. This is why, look, when you make documentaries, you get into it to learn and explore and be places that you wouldn't have found yourself. And then you also do it to help bring awareness to subjects and topics. And I think that's the number one reason you make films. And then to be able to do that in the wine space, you start to find out that every topic exists in wine. And for me, this is the luckiest, I guess, long story short, this is the honor of my life to be able to have conversations like this. It's why I do my job and why I love my job. So what were we going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, so I feel like to start, if we're going to have a conversation about what Indigenous Peoples Day means, then if you'll allow me, I would like to introduce myself as I would to a Native community.
Sure.
So for Native peoples, in the traditions I grew up in, at least, we are where we're from and who our people are. So we're, broader American culture is very much like, who am I? But many, many Indigenous cultures are about who are we. And so any one of us is only ever part of a bigger community. And it really informs the fundamental decisions that we make. And, because the decision I make is never just for me. It must always be in concert to the greater good, not in sacrifice of myself, but in what's the greatest alignment of my good for the greatest good, and so that's kind of a fundamental approach that I was raised to have. And so for me, as an Indigenous person, to come to other Native communities, I would introduce myself through my people and our place. And so that's what I'm about to share. Okay. I always have to prepare. My great-grandparents are Paul and Anna Chukan of Bristol Bay, Alaska. My grandparents are Gordon and Anisha McCormick. My grandmother is Emily Ivanoff Tickasuk Brown of Norton Sound, Alaska. My parents are Melvin and Catherine Brown. I am Elaine Chukan Brown. My young one is Rachel Schlaita Anuska Williams. I am Unangan Sukpiak and Nupyak, and I am grateful to be here. Thank you.
Very cool. Very, very cool. How many languages were involved in what you just said? Is that one language altogether, or is it multiple?
So my mother's side is Unang and Sukpiak, and those are all island peoples of the coastal Alaskas. So all my family is Western coastal water peoples, and very broadly speaking, we're all part of Inuit groups. So all the circumpolar northern peoples are broadly speaking related. And there's actually,
so this means like Alaska, Canada, Greenland, parts of Russia,
Siberia.
whole Siberia.
Yeah. So right. We're all there's actually some of them are really profoundly closely linked, even with long periods of separation. They're actually much more closely related than you'd expect. And the languages are there are some studies have shown that the languages of Eastern Siberian peoples are more closely related to the languages of Western Alaskan peoples than they are to other languages within Siberia. That they're actually very close kinship ties. So anyway, my mom's side is Unang and Sukpiak. So that's the Unangan are from the Aleutian Islands, what are now called the Aleutian Islands. And then the Sukpiak are from Kodiak Island. So all southern, western islands of what's now Alaska. My father's side, he was born in the village of Shaktoolik and then raised in the village of Unlakleet, which are western coast just south of the Seward Peninsula in Norton Sound area. So there's kind of 4 different tribal groups represented there. My father's side is a Nupyak and a little bit of Yupik, and my mom's side is Unang and Sukpiak, as I said. Very broadly, they're all part of the same language family, but they're 4 different languages at the same time.
This is an incredible thing to just have in your brain at all times. I mean, like all of this ethnographic and incredible, like it's a very different way to describe ancestry, family, and a place than I think, well, certainly I have,
Well, and it's the fabric of who I am. This is just what I was given in being born. This is what I was born into and raised with. I was really lucky. I was raised with my great grandparents on my mom's side. I was especially close to my great grandmother, and one of my kids' native names is her name, and then on my dad's side, his mom, my grandmother, only lived until I was 8, but she had a profoundly strong influence on me, and so I was raised in this way that represents the challenges of being Indigenous in a modern world, but in that I was raised very much part and close to and influenced by our Indigenous cultures, and yet in a mainstream society. And so I grew up in both worlds in this very kind of hybrid sort of way. And so this information is just part of me. But it's also, we all have unseen histories, right? And our own curiosity for each other is the only way those histories become part of the conversation.
That's great. It's great. So when we get back to Indigenous Day, and obviously we'll tie this back to wine and everything. You have a career and a very long, prestigious amount of work in wine. But what does Indigenous Peoples Day mean, and what should it mean? I mean, our conversation is quite serious already, and I know you are a very goofy person. So, but it's important to talk about this stuff. As far as what does it mean, and what is it supposed to mean from your perspective?
Well, so to be honest, it's a bit challenging in that, it's lovely that our presidential leadership created a national holiday, Indigenous Peoples Day. It's very important that that's been done. Recognition of, the founding of America is on the backs of Indigenous peoples who, unfortunately, the truth is that the U.S. depended on genocide. Thankfully, some of us are still here. Recognition of the first peoples of North America is essential to the health and well-being of all of us going forward. We have to acknowledge where we live and the truth of where we live. And Indigenous Peoples Day is part of doing that. The positive side, too, is that in being honest, we can celebrate how fucking vibrant and amazing the Indigenous cultures of North America are. Seriously, we're incredible people. And the fact that we're around, considering so many things that we've survived, like, it's remarkable that we're around. There are some of us here. It's a miracle. It's remarkable. And that's another thing I really live with, is this idea that my life is a miracle. I did not make it a miracle. But the fact that I live is a miracle. And so for me, there's this kind of depth of accountability and responsibility I carry, because I must honor what I've been given, But again, the upside is, like, my God, Nicole Mann's in space. Woo! She landed at the space station yesterday. She lives there now. We got natives taking over outer space, It's like, hell yeah,
First Indigenous person in space, let alone she's the mission.
Well, no,
leader,
we've
too,
had actually we had a Native American man was I unfortunately I'm blanking on his name, but he went to space. He did a spacewalk. It's been about 20 years now. So
Oh,
we've had
okay.
one
Okay.
other native in space. Man was able to do a spacewalk around 20 years ago, but Nicole
Okay.
Mann's the first Native American woman member of the Wailaki tribe, which is from here in what's now California.
And she's the mission leader, so that's not,
Yeah, which is very
this
cool.
isn't,
Super
yeah, it's pretty
badass.
pretty great. So, all right, so I mean, one of the things, how much of this is about, like you said, you're here, that's a miracle. So how much of it is about visibility and just look, see us? It's just like, here we are existing. How much of Indigenous Peoples Day, or at least like what people should take? It's really hard to go, hey, this is Black History Month, or this is Indigenous Peoples Day, or whatever. I mean, that's not, it's a thing, hopefully a seed. So I'm not trying to say like, yay, that's it. But how much of it is about visibility and sparking that seed?
The visibility is essential.
Mhm.
It's not enough, but it's essential. But the thing is that lack of equity or obstacles to resources or access, like availability of jobs, recognition that people can be qualified for various things, none of that can change until we acknowledge at least that Indigenous peoples exist.
Right.
Visibility is step one. So it's essential. It's not enough, but it's essential. It's as simple
Yeah.
as that.
Well, I think it's been interesting for me at SOMM TV, because I met Tara Gomez. I met you, and then I met Tara, and Tara's story. If you are a storyteller or like to tell stories, Tara's story is incredible. I mean, it was something that knocked me off my feet. And we filmed the Verticals episode, and like we've had everyone who's ever heard us have a conversation, it's like, you can take the fact that Tara's native, or you could just have her wine at a Saturday night out to dinner and go, holy shit, this is incredible wine. Her story makes it richer, but she's making incredible wine, meaning one doesn't have to equal the other, but they're stronger together, if that equates. And
Yeah, absolutely.
but in meeting Tara, I also was exposed to something that was tremendous. And I think when I say there's a lot of joy in this conversation, Tara is a very happy person. Tara is somebody who has taken, I'm sure, a lot of adversity and moved it into something that is a really positive and really fun and really, really hardworking business that she does. And we filmed a harvest episode with her. Got a blind tasting sessions with her and her wife. We filmed, she's now become like sort of just part of it. And, when we do our big episode in the San Ynez Valley, as far as like what wines are there, what grapes are growing, I mean, she'll just be an expert in it. And it's just an interesting thing for me to have had that exposure. And, I don't take it for granted, but feel like it's just so wonderful that it is happening. And it's not enough, but it is for me. I guess I'm not trying to make this about me, but for me, it was a very big eye opening situation to just, like you say, have Indigenous people in our content. I know that sounds like I'm
No,
not
but it
looking
is
for a pat on the
important.
back or anything. I'm just saying it's
No,
like, it's an incredible learning experience to be around the culture.
well, it's really important. Something as simple as, Tara and I both have done multiple episodes of very different kinds with you, and at least one of those together, and some podcast episodes with you together, Tara and I together. And some of those explicitly talk about our Indigenous backgrounds, and some of them don't at all. Because, Tara as a winemaker and myself as a person who's traveled the world writing and speaking about wine, for both of us, our Indigenous cultures and backgrounds absolutely inform how we do our work, because it's simply part of who we are. But the fact that we've succeeded and accomplished and are good at our jobs, that's not because we're native. That's because we're awesome. And
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
you
No,
know,
that's important.
no,
That's
but
important.
really, and so Native people are awesome. Tara and I are two examples, and you've been lucky enough to film about it. How cool is
True.
that? But
True.
yeah, but like you said, some of the work that we've done that is visible on SOMM TV, so like the blind tasting episode between Tara and Maria, and then the drink a bottle episode between Kelly and myself, those are about us being really funny, interesting people.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Which
no
you are.
denial, right? But the truth is, like, as we're all culturally getting used to listening to and valuing the cultural diversity that the US is formed on, right? Like, as we get used to valuing that, recognizing that our life experiences, our cultural histories and stories are integral to who we are, and are also not why we ended up somewhere, but are part of how we learn to get there at the same time, you know?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, I think it's an interesting thing. I mean, when it came to being Indigenous, when any conversation that I've had with you or you've had with Tara or whatever else, I would say it starts with that conversation and what that means and things, but it quickly goes into a very, I think, from an outsider standpoint, a very bright outlook on the future. I mean, the positivity that oozes from you about how wonderful this is infectious. Just to be like, look, we can do anything. And that's what I think is so important about the space mission you mentioned. It's like, if you are a little girl or a little boy, or even if you're in your 40s and you see that happen and you're Indigenous, there's no ceiling. You can do
It's
anything. It's like,
Well, and the
you
thing
can do
is,
anything.
you can do anything, but it's, when the announcement about Nicole Mann came out, first thing I did was text it to my nieces and my kid. And then I started sobbing. It's like, so I mean, if you'll allow me to do a very quick sketch of my family history
Sure. Yeah,
to
please.
make this point of, like, the point about, like, the brightness of the future, I think, again, honoring and being honest about our history is how we can claim the brightness of our future. When we deny the truth of our histories, it's actually harder to see fully enough to know what our potential is.
Hmm.
So, my father's side, he was raised by his grandparents and his mother. This is very common in a lot of Indigenous communities, to be raised in a multi-generational way. I was as well. But my dad was raised by his grandparents and his mother. Because of the history of Alaska, the for Native peoples to receive an education, they had to leave what is now the state. And so my grandmother, my dad's mom, was taken from her people at the age of 9 and brought to Shamawa, which is just outside the town of Salem in Oregon. And she lived there continuously for 9 years. So she lived in Indian boarding school from 9 until the age of 18. And she had absolutely no contact with her family, her people, her culture, her place. She was not ever able to return in those 9 years. By the time she finished school, she had lost her language, but she also had gotten elementary through high school education and was certified as a teacher. And so she accomplished a lot in the 9 years she had. When she returned to Alaska, she had fully lost her language and she had to do the work of reclaiming it. But in having that experience, she became a public school teacher teaching in villages around the northern parts of the state. And she ended up, this is Emily Ivanoff Tikasuk Brown, my grandmother. And so she ended up instigating an Alaska Native heritage reclamation movement because she herself had lost her culture for 9 years, had to reclaim her language. And in coming back to her people, realized how incredibly important it was to preserve what would just that quickly be lost, right? If she could lose it in 9 years, imagine what one generation could do to the whole culture. So she helped preserve languages of the region, stories, mythologies, and histories of the region, and instigated an Alaska Native preservation movement that was recognized by the President of the United States. Unfortunately, it was Nixon, but still, okay.
Still president.
Her work was also recognized by the governor of Alaska. She received multiple grants and funds to help support this work, and it led to the creation of an Alaska Native Studies program through the University System of Alaska. So that's she also helped change the law. It was illegal for people to speak their native languages in the state, in what was the territory of Alaska at the time. And so she was fired from her teaching position because she had her students speak their languages in school. And the entire region did a protest, basically like early days walkout, and
Uh-huh.
and they kept the protests going until my grandmother was rehired. And that helped instigate conversations that led to the changing of the law, making it legal to speak your languages again. So that's my dad's side. And my mom's side, I was raised by my great-grandparents, her grandparents. She was raised by her grandparents. Again, this multi-generational family is very traditional for our peoples. But my great-grandparents never learned to read or write. My great-grandfather is one of the most intelligent people I've ever known. But neither of them went to school. And the reason was because if for them to go to school, they would have had to leave the state. And authorities actually came to take them. And the people that were raising them fought and kept the authorities from successfully taking my great-grandparents. So the advantage of that is they did not lose their culture in that way. But they also never learned to read and write. And so that transition of navigating the modern world was harder for them. Thankfully,
how remote are we talking? Because I mean, I've seen you've shared a lot of photos with me of some of this, older times that your grandparents were younger, and it looks like a beautiful but very wild place.
Yeah, it's super remote still today. You easily could freeze to death or get eaten by a bear or wolves in either place. I grew, and
usually that would be hyperbolic if somebody said
but
that.
I literally grew up in encountering bears regularly. I personally didn't encounter wolves.
Is this
wild,
how you can deal with other journalists? Because I find them to be
because it's like,
same
come
taxonomy.
On, you think you're badass, but you're not actually a bear. I'm fine, I'm fine. So both places are inaccessible by road. You would have to fly in or take very, very long boat trips to get to either. And they're on the other side of some of the biggest mountain ranges in the world. So,
wow.
And that's my mother's side. But what's happened now, fast forward to me, I should say, both my parents were also, for them to get education, they also had to go to Indian boarding school. The difference was that by the time they were growing up, the Indian boarding schools were in the state of Alaska. So both my parents had to leave their home regions to go to school in a different part of the state of what's now the state of Alaska. And so they also grew up removed from their regions, but surrounded by Native peoples. There's this amazing photo of my dad, who's this incredible athlete. There's this amazing photo of my dad competing in the regional track meet. And he's doing the running long jump. And the photo, he's mid-air about, close to landing. And if you look at the faces of the crowd, he's surrounded, fully surrounded. The launch pad of the running long jump is fully lined with kids there to see him compete because he was so incredible. And they're all Native kids. And it's because it's the Indian boarding school. My dad was this incredible athlete. And in fact, in that competition that I'm talking about the photos from, he won 7 gold medals, but in both field events and sprint events. And because of him essentially taking the meet with 7 gold medals, they changed regulations so that no athlete can compete in more than 4 events going forward. And that's because of my dad. So anyway, both my parents also grew up in Indian boarding schools. And then by the time they had gotten married and had my oldest sister, for them to have a job, my dad became a teacher and coach in an Indian boarding school, and my sister was raised in one. My mom was the house mom, and my dad was the teacher and coach.
And it seems like such far away history. And yet your sister was at an Indian boarding school.
My sister grew up, the first several years of her life in an Indian boarding school where my parents worked, because that was the best way for them to have a job and for them to be able to care for these young, it was a boys' school in that case, for them to be able to care for these young boys. They saw that as an incredible honor. It was the best way they could help their community.
Yeah.
So what's fast forward now to me, and it's overwhelming and it tears me up. But the truth is, like, I have ended up becoming an elder for not just for my kid, but for my sister's kids. And the idea that like I can already act in that position. It's overwhelming, but it's because I was lucky enough to be close to my great grandparents and my grandmother. And so I have been able to give the native names to both um, my child and my sister's child, and they both use those as their official names now. And I did not do this. They did most of the work, but I've been able to support them in reclaiming our traditional markings. And the two of them have taught themselves and each other what the markings are. I've helped them um, understand what the markings mean, and they have taught themselves how to do that. And so they now both carry traditional markings. It's pretty, this is what I mean about the future, understanding that we can recognize the past and reclaim the good of it. And now it literally marks who we are, myself and the next generation that I am here to support. That's how I can honor my great grandparents and my grandmother, by supporting them, my kid and my sister's kids.
It's tremendous, Elaine. How should people like me, what should we do for Indigenous Peoples Day? What should we do? What do you think is a base entry? Here's something you could do to understand or take action or just think.
Try, the big thing for people to remember is that we're here to listen to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, part of why I'm willing to have this conversation with you is because you're listening. Like you've and I don't know if you remember this, but the first time you and I ever talked, I was like, okay, show me who you are. And I basically interviewed you for an hour and a half. And then I was like, I'm willing to talk to you again. And then I interviewed you for another hour the next time, and then I'm like, okay, we're going to be fine,
I remember a couple people. One, Kelly White, not to throw her name out, but she was like, how did it go when you talked to Elaine? Because I told Kelly, look, I'd like to talk to Elaine. And she was like, you should. But, she's not messing around. She's very, she you're going to get vetted is essentially what she was alluding to. And then I remember after I talked to you, my wife was like, how'd it go with Elaine? I was like, she's not fucking around.
Yeah.
I was like, and it's a huge honor. I mean, first of all, I think you're one of the most fun people to hang out with, and anybody watching or listening to this who knows you knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, you could be one of the most fun person to have a glass or a gin with at any given point. But also too, you take this stuff incredibly seriously in the right possible way, but you listen too. And that's the thing that's tremendous, is to give. I think honestly, you think I'm giving you an opportunity, you're giving me an opportunity. And that's really the truth of what for me to have, for you to give, I guess it's not permission, it's for you to open yourself up to let me ask these questions and be a part of this conversation, and for you to listen to what probably is a lot of stupid questions occasionally, or a lot of uninformed questions, or a lot of is really brave. And honestly, how I think things go the right direction, So, I mean, for me, it's an opportunity for me. So I just want you to know that that's how I look at it. It's not an opportunity for you to be on this. It's an opportunity for me to have you.
Thank you. I think, again, the most important thing is for us to know that we're here to listen, and that I don't need other people's opinions about my people and my people's histories. I already fucking know. Okay. I'm serious. I am well aware of the history of my peoples. I have a background in Indigenous studies. I've been part of multiple multinational, multidisciplinary research groups on these subjects. I already fucking know. Okay. For me, I'm interested in listening to people who also listen and are thoughtful and care and are genuine in that way. Right. And that's why you and I are having our conversation. And so, and I think, just to quickly tie it back to wine and my work in wine, that perspective that I received from my culture and how I was raised, that's what I take to my work in wine. And I think that even though I've been able to travel the world, not because I'm an Indigenous person, but because I'm really good at my job, I'm really good at what I do in wine. But so it's not because I'm Indigenous, but that perspective of knowing to listen and to be thoughtful and to care about understanding, that comes from my peoples. And that's what's made me good at what I do. I'm good at what I do, not because of me, but because I was given something I care enough about carrying forward. You
Yeah.
know? And so for everyone else, it's like, okay, good. Practice listening, practice being genuine without needing to express your opinion. Learn more before you have an opinion, right? And then and then like go seek materials, Instagram accounts, films that are actually made by native peoples. Not white people thinking they know, but actual native peoples that are sharing their perspective. Learn that way. It's another way of listening, but through literature, through news writing, through film. You know.
Well, I want to say, so obviously we have a collection of things that we're putting up that, you know, on SOMM TV that feature you, feature Tara, feature, you know, both talking about being Indigenous and not, and just, you know, just being in wine. And I wish, and I will work towards having many more people on the platform that are Indigenous, but right now you and Tara are sort of holding a torch, and Tara's family is quite a bit in all of that stuff as well. I hope to get Rachel, because I just know she is fantastic, but I do want to call out your wine and spirits article that you did that was nominated for a James Beard Award. We were both at the James Beard Awards, me for Sparklers and you for this article. Guys and gals listening, I want you all to understand that this article, it's called Caribou Bones in Burgundy. It is fan effing tastic. It is like, it's one of these things where when you got nominated, I was like, oh my God, my friend is on this. Congratulations. I hadn't read it. You know, I wish that I had. I'm just so busy that I can't keep up with life. And it got sent to me by everyone on my team in 1 second. They're like, Elaine, everyone, it came like in 40 angles. They're like, have you read it? Have you read it? Have you read it? And then the whole cast of Sparklers is like, oh my God, Elaine's nominated too. I read this article and I was like, this is absolutely fantastic. And it's got something in its simplicity that is really rare in writing right now. You know, you see like a long read from the Atlantic or something that's like, you look at it and it's like a 42-minute read. And you're like, what? This accomplishes more than most of those articles in, I mean, I don't know how many words it is. You'd probably know, but like, this is a tremendously awesome article that brings
800
culture.
Words.
I knew you would know. This brings up the concept of all of the things I will strive and never achieve to make culture, food, wine, and story mix. And you did it in 800 words here with an article that I wish you had won. The article that did win is also very good too. So I don't want to, you know, hey, we didn't win either. So,
you know what though? For the rest of our lives, we're James Beard nominees.
You're
You know,
damn right. I remember having
and that's a huge honor. So
a boozy brunch with you the next morning and toasting to that.
Or I was like, for the rest of our lives, we're
like,
James Beard nominees.
Then we got arrested later that day. We were sitting in jail too. It was great.
That was after the boat ride.
That's what you guys did go on. I didn't go on that boat ride. I was catching a flight, I think, back.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Okay. Just for fact checkers out there, we did not get arrested. I did go on a boat ride. We were not slurring in our toast, but it's funnier when you tell it that way, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I don't think anyone's fact checking this pod.
Okay. I'm just making sure, you know, I'm just trying to help out the team, you know, but thank you for mentioning that piece. That piece is really important to me. And, Caribou Bones in Burgundy, Wine and Spirits magazine published it. You can find it on their website online. And I'm really grateful to Josh Green for having the vision of letting me write a piece like that. And because the truth is a piece like that hasn't been written in wine before. And for me to bring my family and my people and our food traditions into conversation with the greatest wines in the world is a big deal. And I have a proposal for you, Jason. When my brother-in-law is able to get subsistence caught moose or caribou, I propose that you and I get together with an incredible chef and maybe like Kelly White for funsies and do a like making caribou bone soup and then how to pair it with wine episode.
How about yes? Oh my God, please. How about that? That's tremendous. Yeah. off mic, you can tell me when we can pull this off. Like,
Okay.
consider the proposal accepted.
Okay.
That's amazing. Elaine, it's such an honor to have these conversations. I'm always sort of proverbially fills up my cup. It's good. And I hope that people think more about Indigenous Peoples Day than just I have the day off,
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing this conversation to, out to people, to sharing the episodes that you have with Tara and myself, and to really trying to open up the way for people to think about, what is the value of this day? What does it mean? So thank you for that.
It's my honor and my whole team's honor. So more to come from you. I guarantee it. So we'll talk very soon. Okay. Thank you, Elaine.
Sounds good. Thank you.